First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer. How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Chair Talk, and today I want to discuss empathy versus sympathy. I think it's a great topic. I don't think it's as controversial as it used to be. I remember there was such a divide when I would ask people, do you understand the difference between empathy and sympathy? And it's great when I posted this up on the community board to see that over 90% now realize that there is that difference. And I was taught that right from day one of the academy. There is that difference between empathy and sympathy. And I feel comfortable now in trying to explain that difference. I would love your input on this video as well. Also, below is going to be 4 links. I did a video on this, or it's actually from a podcast, so it's actually really an audio that's on an older YouTube channel I had, and it's with Gary York. So below you're going to see the links, and it's a great dialogue on empathy versus sympathy, just a conversation that we had a few years back that really discusses the difference and how it applies to corrections. So I'm going to be a little brief in this video. I'm also going to give Russ a spot too, because Russ gave me a video that I felt was awesome. I'm going to add it into this video as well. And I think this will be a great training video on discussing differences of empathy versus sympathy, how it applies to corrections, and how we can utilize one as a tool. That's the key. And how the other one can be used against us. That's another key. All right, guys, so when we come back from our sponsors, we'll discuss the difference between empathy and sympathy. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, you brave men and women that work that front line, so please comment, interact, engage, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. I stand by for our sponsor.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it. It's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Thank you guys for listening to my sponsor. So a while ago, guys, this was a complicated topic, and I think for some reason there was a confusion between the differences between empathy and sympathy. And when you would ask people what the confusion was, they would kind of define empathy the same way as you would define sympathy. And then I remember the first day of the academy, I was taught the difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is more objective, and sympathy is more subjective. Sympathy actually can be a tool used by manipulative inmates to gain favor. You know, it forces someone to make a decision based on emotion. So that's why when I do manipulation courses, I want people to know the difference between empathy and sympathy. It's okay to be empathetic. Again, that's like me seeing things from your perspective, but I'm not wearing your shoes. I'm not absorbed with the emotion of feeling guilt or whatever the case it is that you may try to push as a way to gain favor. Sympathy is really getting involved, wearing their shoes, and just feeling, in some cases, sorry for the inmate. And it's funny because inmates will try to employ sympathy when they try to pull you out of your prescribed role and try to connect with you on something that's outside of your professional responsibilities. I'll give you an example of when sympathy can be employed. Let's say an inmate does something foolish, and part of the consequence is a loss of visits. Well, the inmate may come up to you and say how important his visits are, and by you taking away his visits, not going to be able to see his children, that's going to have an effect on his children because they're coming to see him, and all this other stuff. And he's going to try all these different angles. But at the end of the day, he's the one that did something wrong, or she's the one that did something wrong that required that consequence. So you can't feel guilty for having to implement that consequence. The inmate did something foolish. Well, the consequence is that you lost the visits. I'm sorry. It's sad that you lost your visits. It's sad that your family's not going to be able to see you over the weekend or whenever the visits are held. But at the end of the day, you did something wrong. So you can't make me feel guilty for the situation that you did. You did it. And again, sympathy, it will blind you. The emotion will blind you from making the right decision. Being empathetic, that's all right. It's good to understand where people are coming from. It really is. Doesn't mean that you're caught up in the emotion of it all. It just means I understand where you're coming from, and hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. But it's taking an appreciation for that person's perspective. But again, you're not caught in the emotion. You're not caught in the subjective perspective of being sympathetic. So again, I think it's a great dialogue. I'm glad that I was able to see on my board that over 90% now see that difference. Is something I was taught right from the get-go of the academy. It's something I continue to teach when it comes to manipulation, because sympathy can be utilized in many ways to gain favor. So it's good for us to realize the difference on both ways. So again, being sympathetic is subjective. It can blind you emotionally to making decisions that really don't benefit the facility. In actuality, it just benefits the inmate because it's a decision meant to gain favor for them. And in some cases, they may look for you to be sympathetic when they're looking to get out of a consequence. And in that case, they'll try to make you feel guilty for having to write them that consequence. But again, it's their actions that led them to that. Empathy is just simple, guys. Just, I understand your perspective. I'm giving you that respect. But in return, you need to understand mine. And the two are different. Now, Russ, what do you got?
Hi, everyone. Anthony Gangi reached out to me earlier today and asked if I'd like to do a quick little video on empathy versus sympathy. So if you work in the correctional field, it's a really good idea to know the definition of these things and how understanding this can really give you a one-up in dealing with inmates, because you know, there's a dynamic psychology and interaction between inmates and staff, and knowing the difference between these two things can help you avoid some very serious problems that can occur when you don't understand the dynamic of what's occurring. So real quick, just a quick definition here. Empathy is simply understanding how someone feels. You're able to put yourself in their shoes and see what their point of view is, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. Sympathy, on the other hand, is actually having an emotional response to what their situation is. You know, it's being sorry for them. And things like feeling sorry for someone, to whatever degree, can cloud your judgment. It can take away your objectivity, and it can put you in a position where you can be more easily manipulated. And that manipulation can have a whole host of bad impacts on security. And even just not holding that inmate accountable for what he does, getting away with more stuff. It's something you truly want to avoid. We have to treat these inmates, you know, on an equal footing, each one of them with another, and we have to hold them accountable. And sympathy doesn't allow that to happen. When you become too sympathetic, you just simply get to a point where all you might work toward is having rapport and never holding them accountable. It's the same thing that sometimes happens with officers, some administrators, and you just have sympathy and rapport and understanding, but no accountability ever takes place. And that can really diminish, you know, the effectiveness of your unit. It can badly affect the security, the safety, and everything else, because everyone's just running hog wild, and they're being allowed to do that. And I think that to a degree, that may be one of the bigger problems that we've always faced, and may always face to some degree in corrections, but understanding it may help some units and some people be able to minimize and mitigate that particular aspect, especially if you do some training with your folks on this particular subject. And that's why it's a good idea to understand these two words and understand the definitions and how they impact you know, the dynamics between the actions between staff and between inmates. Now, on the other hand, with empathy, empathy is a tool that we can use to establish some rapport, because obviously you have to have some rapport, but rapport is not the be-all, end-all of what we're trying to do. But rapport can establish an understanding. I don't like the term, but it can establish a respect between the two sides, and be able to function, and in a sense be able to carry out a more effective, more harmonious unit to a degree. Although obviously that's not always the case. But anyway, thought I'd lay those two definitions on you. I hope to get plenty of feedback about this. Hope to see some questions about that out there, and want to see some people add their own 2 cents worth on this stuff. So anyway, stay safe, guys, gals, and looking forward to those comments.